Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. We're doing our statewide webinar for September, which is Behavior Intervention Plans. We'll get started on that here in just a minute, but before we do, I want to introduce myself and our organization, as well as who will be with us today. I'm Megan Sanders, and I'm the Training and Evaluation Specialist for Partners Resource Network. We have Ms. Christina Henning, who is also joining us, and she is the Director for Statewide Services for Partners Resource Network. We are the nonprofit agency that operates the statewide network of parent training and information centers in Texas. We have the PATH Project, the PEN Project, and the TEAM Project. We are federally funded by a grant from Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs, known as OSEP. We provide training, information, education, referrals, technical assistance, and emotional support for parents of children birth to 26 years of age. That is who we are. And our speaker for today is Mr. Layne Pethick. And I will introduce him and I'll let him get started. He is a Ph.D. and is an autism spectrum disorder and behavior consultant for Region 10 ESC. He has a Ph.D. in business and organizational leadership and has a master's degree in special education with a concentration in autism spectrum disorders and emotional behavior, which is human behavior, along with degrees in elementary education, early childhood education, and reading. Layne has experience as a general and special education teacher, a school administrator, district trainer, program director, and in higher education as a professor of special education, assessment, early childhood, and teacher education. He has had several articles published and presents at local, state, national, and international conferences. He has and continues to work with various countries in the areas of education and special education. Those include Mexico from 2009 to 2011, Hong Kong in 2009. He's currently working with Canada, Vietnam, and across the United States. So that is a little bit about Layne, and I will let you get started.
Oh, thank you. I will have to say to everybody out there in this virtual world, this is outside of my comfort zone doing webinars. I like being face-to-face with people. It is weird seeing me on a screen as I talk, but I do want to welcome everybody today. You understand that I'm going to cover this thing called a BIP in about 45 minutes. I'm just going to hit the tip of the iceberg. So to give you a little snippet, I just picked out some of the more important areas of a BIP that you want to pay attention to when you are looking at or you're deciding whether to do one or not with a student. So I just basically titled this Behavior Intervention Plans, just things to think about. I come from this idea is I'm not trying to tell people what to do for kids. I want you to think about what we're doing with kids. How do we do it better? What are some things we can do and look at that will help our children more? And so as we go through this, I know you'll probably have lots of questions. I promise you I will try and end in about 45 minutes. We have some time for questions. I will tell you right off the bat, my disclaimer is I may not have the answer to some of your questions, but we'll surely try and figure it out. So I welcome everyone today from wherever you're at. Welcome and enjoy. I have a couple of rules. I need you to sit back and relax. I need you to have your coffee or whatever drink you have and take it easy. If you need to get up and go to the restroom, I will have no idea. You just get up and go. So just sit back and enjoy. I will try and make this as entertaining as I can as you stare at a screen. So here we go. Just to get started, I need all of my adults out there to get into the right mindset. When we are dealing with behavior, if all we're going to look at is the behavior itself, then we stop seeing children. All we get stuck in is how do we reward or punish this behavior out of a child? I will tell you right now, my background is the neurological side. And I am not the person that's going to tell you how to reward or punish children or use consequences. We have to teach behavior. Behavior has to be taught just like everything else is taught to us in our lives. And so when you look behind the behavior and you see where my struggles are, we see where the kids' struggles are, then you truly start helping me for something I need. So that's the mindset I try and get people into. And so the first few slides, I just want you to read and I just want you to enjoy. Just things that this is the trajectory we're going with a BIP. Kids are not going to walk up to you and say, I'm struggling and I need to cope and self-regulate. They're probably just going to have some challenging ways to do that. They're the same thing. I look at people all the time, like even let's take, for instance, timeout. We'll put you in timeout and think about what you did. Most children's brains are not developed anywhere near enough to sit and think about what I did wrong. Many children, up until through their teenagers, do not know how to think through their emotions unless I have an adult sitting there with me, walking me through it. So I tell people a lot of times is kids, sometimes the behavior and sometimes the acting out we get is the only way they know how to try and get our attention to make us understand what's going on. And so I always like this picture about a child's behavior as an iceberg. We just tend to see what's at the very top. Our job, especially with BIPs and looking at behavior analysis, is trying to find out what's underneath it. And that's the important part, is to look at what's underneath the behavior so we can start helping this little human being become better with who they are and what they need to do. So I also share with these people too, our priorities with our students, and this is for parents, this is for educators, anybody who works with children out there right now, these should be our priorities for kids. Our first priority for our children should be the social emotional learning side of it. Are we teaching them coping skills? Are we teaching them how to self-regulate? All those wonderful social emotional skills. Then our second priority should be the behavior skills. What behavior skills do I currently struggle with, and what do you need to teach me? And then if you take 1 + 2, you will always end up with 3, which is the academic piece for our students. However, if you try to get to 3 without 1 or 2, it's bad math and you can't get there. So I always tell people it's an easy way to look at our kids is it's a simple math problem. You have 1 and you have 2, you will always get to 3. And so this is what BIP should be the focus in, is how do we get our kids the well-rounded, all of these 3 areas and to help them out. So for those of you who know me, I say this a lot. I've lived a life of behavior. I've lived a life of teaching all kinds of levels and all kinds of kids. And I've come to realize that there really is only one expert and one specialist that exists, and it's actually the child. The child themselves are the only ones who know why they're doing what they're doing. And if we're not paying attention to that expert, then we're out. And we need to get better at paying attention to our true experts. It's the children and the students who need our help. And that's just kind of my philosophy on things. And so now we'll get into this wonderful thing called a BIP, or the Behavior Intervention Plan. People are always asking, what should we do and how do we know if we need one or not? And I always tell people it's something about we need to look at when a student is exhibiting these consistent and significant behaviors that are interfering with the learning, or they're interfering with the learning of others. We all know what this looks like. We all kind of should know when it should be important for us to look at a BIP. Usually I tell people best practice is to usually do functional behavior analysis before we get into a BIP. Basically what that is just collect as much information about this kiddo as we can so we can start making better decisions on the things that we need to do to help them. FBA should include everybody that knows the child, parents, teachers, get information from paraprofessionals that may work with them. Anybody who works with the child should have input onto some sort of documentation or data that we're doing to find out what's best for our kids. So this is an interesting thing. There really is no tried or true definition of a BIP, but what I did is I took some things and I put a bunch of things together for you guys to consider. Please understand, when we're doing a behavior intervention plan, it needs to be for the child, for that individual child. It shouldn't look like other people's behavior plans. It should be individual based off of what the child's needs are. And so basically a behavior intervention plan is just what type of assistance and what types of supports are we going to provide this child to help that's socially appropriate behaviors. Here's one of the things I talk about people, and I brought this up the last few times I've talked about BIPs. I've looked at some BIPs that the behaviors that they're trying to teach the children really have no social significance. They're more compliance and control behaviors. We got to look at what does this child need? What are some socially appropriate behaviors that we need to start teaching this child, that we need to start teaching this student? And it's also, while we're doing that, how do we diminish the pattern of behaviors they currently have that's interfering with their life and their learning and their social interactions at school and different things like that. So I kind of summed a little bit up in the next bullet, and I just highlighted some things for you guys to pay attention in here. Socially appropriate, diminishing. The big thing in the next bullet is the intensiveness. You get to a BIP, and if I'm one of your students and you're creating a BIP for me, that means I'm going to need some intensive support. I'm going to need some intensive support, intervention, and monitoring. And how does that look for me? And what is that going to mean for me? And so those are the big things to start looking at with a BIP. And I understand I'm probably not wowing the masses with anything new, but a lot of this, for those of us who know a lot about BIPs, or those of us who write BIPs all the time, or for those of you out there who are always involved in BIPs, just some things to remind us to look back and take a look at. So another part to look at is it should incorporate a comprehensive set of procedures and support. Not just one or two, there should be a comprehensive set of these procedures and support strategies that are related to my needs and who I am and my preferences. It's got to be so individualized. When we get to this level of a BIP, or like, let's say some people will call it a tier 3 level for behavior, when we're looking at MTSS and what used to be called RTI, and I love the acronym game we play. But the reality of it is there really is no program to buy for this. A lot of people want to buy programs and say, well, what program can we buy to help this child? It really isn't a program. You're having to create one. You're having to look at this individual student and actually create a program that is tailor-made for this student. I always joke with people, a lot of the kiddos I get to work with on a daily basis are a lot of kids who may have BIPs, or they have severe or intensive behaviors. And I always tell them, they're the ones who take love and logic and turn it into hate and despair in 3 seconds flat. They'll take discipline with dignity and leave you with no dignity. It's just because programs aren't working. It's got to be individualized for our kids. And that's something I really, really need to push across to people. Because I see still a lot of people, when they're working with BIPs and they're working with kids with more intensive behaviors, you're still looking for a program to buy. Let me just lay it out there right now. It is not about your programs. It is about your people. It is all about the people that are working with our kids. You can have the best programs in the world, but if you don't have the best people, we're out. And so just some things to consider, because that's part of a BIP you got to consider, is who are the people that are going to be highly involved with the process of a BIP with this student too. And so just some things to consider. Parents, for all my parents out there, if your child is having a BIP developed to help assist them with their behaviors, you are also a major part of this. I will explain to parents that whatever's been decided with the BIP, I need parents to also look at that BIP and how can you incorporate some of those skills in the home too. It takes all of us to do this. The school can't do it alone, and the parents can't do it alone. We all have to be in it together. And any other entity that's involved, we call it the old wraparound services, but it does take all of us to help our kids. And these are some things to discuss as you're looking at the BIP process. Just some last part to look at at kind of a basic definition is that it's a plan that you're looking to change these undesirable patterns of behavior, but we still got to be respectful of the student and their students' dignity. I always tell people, we are all equal when it comes to dignity and respect, regardless of age, race, or my behaviors. We all need respect and dignity. And so this plan should promote my capabilities or students' capabilities if you're going to have one for me. What am I good at? What are my strengths? If you're not playing to my strengths, this isn't going to work. And so part of it is getting a good gauge on what am I good at? What are my strengths if I'm the student who's needing a BIP? And so just some things to consider when we're looking at just beginning something. What I did is I looked at a bunch of components for BIPs. There's a lot. For anyone who's ever looked through BIP information, wow. You could just do a web search for about 7 days and just get inundated with information. I will say, however, what I did is I took some of the basic components of a BIP that we should all highly, highly consider. There's really no one way, one format that we can do a BIP. There's different formats for it. There's different variations of it because it has to be individualized. But I will say, and this is the Layne Pethick world, these are some of the most important components I look for when I look at a BIP. Because without these components, we're probably going to have some struggles. And so I'll just share them with you. And please understand, it's not an exhaustive list. It's just that in the time I have with 45 minutes or whatever it is I'm down to now, which I know I'm getting down there, I had to pick out about 4 of them that I thought I'd really like for my audience, you guys out there in the virtual world, to just talk about or discuss long after you shut me off and you power down your computer. I'm hoping that these components I talked to you about today just kind of generate discussion one way or another, just to start talking about things and maybe consider things, maybe doing some things different when you're looking at BIPs. So that's my hope. Target behaviors. This is the first component we want to look at for a BIP, because if you don't know what behaviors you're looking at to help the child with, then you're just kind of willy-nilly writing stuff everywhere. And so target behaviors is important. And for those of you out there who aren't sure with the terminology target behaviors, here's what I'll say. It's the behavior that I'm looking at helping the child change. And so you have to identify it and you have to describe it. If I was to come into a school and pick up a BIP, would I be able to look at what the target behavior is and completely understand and be able to recognize it while I'm working with the child? You have to describe it. You gotta describe it so it's easy to observe. So just anyone who comes in to work with the child, you've described that behavior, those behaviors well enough that I understand what I'm looking for, and those are the behaviors that we're needing to help the child with. Target behaviors. I will say one thing I do, and I've preached this for a long time, and I know I'm not the only one out there on this island, but when it comes to children who might exhibit multiple behaviors that we need to work on, I will say usually, I'm going to be honest, most kids just don't come with one. There are usually several. There's usually a handful of behaviors that we're all wanting to help the child get better with. However, when you're making a BIP, I will ask and I will reiterate that you prioritize the behaviors and you only look at dealing with the top 1 or 2. I have here 1 to 3. I'll cut people slack to 3, but usually with a BIP, you're looking at the 1 or 2 top behaviors. It just isn't effective to try and change all of them. Understanding how human behavior works. Human behavior, we have our top behaviors. All of our little residual behaviors are usually attributed to that 1 or 2 top behaviors. So if you're helping me with my bigger issues and my bigger behaviors, the little ones tend to dissipate off once you start working with me on these other ones. And so sometimes what happens is I'll see BIPs written with, you're looking at upwards of, I've seen some written for up to 8 behaviors. All you're doing is we're just chasing our tails in circles. And the problem with that is we're always just looking at the bad things. We're never coming out of that cycle of always eyeballing these behaviors that we look at as not so good. And so just keep it to the top 1 or 2. And I will share with you what we would do when we looked at BIPs is we'd actually, just with parents and teachers and everybody in the room, and this is just my suggestion, you just make a list of all the behaviors that that the child seems to be struggling with, and just take a look at all of them and just rank order them on which ones we really need to help the child with right now, and pick those as your top ones for a BIP. It's an easy process to do. It's just getting adults to sit down and take a look at it. Because sometimes too with adults, here's a problem. What I see as a problem, another adult may not see as a problem. And so understanding and coming to common ground is important too when we're starting to develop what behaviors are we going to look at. And so what I usually tell people though is when you're looking at behaviors, what behaviors are significantly interfering with the learning process, or what behaviors are actually posing a risk to that student or other students or other people. And then also what behaviors that are pivotal. Now, pivotal behaviors are, as I say there in the brackets, that if we were to change, they have a significant impact on the student's learning and motivation, which goes a lot with coping, self-regulation, types of pivotal behavior skills like that, the social emotional side of the world. And so those are some things to look at to help you kind of figure out how to look at which one or two behaviors we need to really start taking a look at. So it's just things I'm sharing with you and some things that a lot of you probably already know. So also what I look for is data. Let me just explain to some people here about my data. I want to see data. I want to see when I'm helping someone with a behavior, with a student, I want to see when is this behavior not occurring and when is it occurring. And I just need to see that. I guess sometimes I'm a different behavior guy. As far as what I want from people when I come to help you, I want to see that you've looked at this behavior. When is it occurring? When is it not occurring? So we can see a couple of things. Is there a pattern to it? Is there a specific pattern that we see over and over again? Or as we see sometimes the behavior sporadic, it's all over the place. Well, if it's all over the place, it's actually a different type of behavior. We call them automatic behaviors. They're a little more difficult to look at. However, just the occurrence and non-occurrence of behavior helps us out. And so I spend a lot of time looking at the non-occurrence. When is the behavior not occurring? What's happening during those times? And why are those times better than others? And how do we extend those out? So those are some discussions to have as you're looking at making a BIP and developing a BIP. Plus the baseline, this will be your baseline. So once you start intervening, you can see if the behavior increases, decreases, or just stays the same. And then we can adjust from there. I said here too, and I put a bunch of stuff in there, but one of the things too about data, I'm a data person. I'm not big on documentation. Writing about a child's behavior. Here's what I tell people. To me, you can document behavior if it has to be something that really needs to be dealt with, office referrals, if there was restraint or whatever else, then document it. If it's just the daily ins and outs of behavior, I don't need to see the journal of all the things the child did that day. I just want to see data points. I just want to see when did the behavior occur and not occur. I joke with people, I sometimes call the documentation piece the diary of despair. It's just people writing down things and blurting it out there, and it's really not productive for us. I like to see the data part of it. And so that's just what I look for. So once we finish looking at the target behavior, this is the fun part, the hypothesis, AKA the educated guess. For parents out there, I'm going to pose this to you. Please understand that a lot of human behavior, we are guessing a lot of the times. And I know people are like, oh no, we do this, we analyze, we got this. No, the analysis and all this stuff is nothing more than just giving us an educated guess on what we're thinking is why the behavior is occurring. And it's that. And as we intervene and as we try things and we do things, we learn more and more and more about the child. And as we learn more and more about the child, then we get closer and closer to really truly finding that true motivator or that true cause of why the child is struggling. And it's just a process. A lot of times people put a behavior plan in place and, oh my goodness, if it's not working within a week, it's horrible. Or we've been doing it for a while, it's just not working. Well, I'm going to tell everybody out there in my virtual land, should you ever create a BIP that works the first time, after you play the lottery, call me because I want to know. I have yet to have a BIP work the first time. We're always revising and doing all this stuff because a lot of what we're doing is we're just hypothesizing what we think is why the behavior is occurring or the function of the behavior. So just please understand it is a process. Any human behavior is a process. It isn't an exact science. For all my parents and all my educators and everybody in the world out there who deals with behavior, I will tell you, anyone who talks in definitives about behavior, walk away slowly or run, whichever you prefer. But if you hear this, you need to do this, or you must do this, or just do this and it'll work, those definitives about behavior scare me because there really are no definitives. We are always in the process of just getting better at trying to figure out the better ways to help somebody. Just do this or just do that kind of gives us this false pretense that, oh, that's all we have to do and things are going to be okay. This part of our world, the hypothesis, is important. So based off all the information you got, all the people who are out there giving you information about what they see and what they're seeing with this particular student, then you look at, well, how does the behaviors, how is a child interacting with different things to acquire these specific behaviors? What is the function of this child's behavior? Why is the child doing what they're doing? And I will share with you right now, I share with people, in my world, there's no such thing as bad behavior. All behavior is that human being's only way to communicate at any given time, good or bad behavior. And so looking at it this way is, what is the function of this child's behavior? How does it occur? Why is it appearing to occur? It's like every time I give him work, he throws it away or he tears it up or he screams or whatever. Well, it may be that the trigger might be work, and we got to start figuring and looking at things and kind of the connections between all of this. And it is just an educated guess based off all the information we have. And we just do the very best we can. Basic assumptions underlying human behavior. And so when we're looking at behavior of all human beings, and I tell people this too, in my world, behavior is behavior is behavior. Whether you have autism or other disabilities or no disabilities or whatever, human behavior is human behavior. We are all exhibiting behavior for some basic underlying issues. And these are the big four. There's a purpose to it. It communicates. It's connected to something, or this one behavior I have actually serves a lot of purposes for me. And so it's time for a commercial break. I'm sure you all want to stretch your legs and stand up. Some of you may have already walked away and coming back, but here's a commercial break. And this commercial break is brought to you by these four basic assumptions about behavior. You see, human behavior may serve to seek these three areas: control, to gain, preference, choices, or objects. It's for me to control my world. It might be for attention. I might actually want to avoid something like your classroom, like your work, like the chores I have to do at home, mom and dad. So my behaviors may serve these three big purposes, or my behavior might serve to communicate. Maybe I'm not feeling well, or maybe I have some trauma and I don't know how to tell you I'm stressed out. I don't know how to tell you that my brain is here right now. And instead of being able to tell you, my behavior, though it may not be what you want to see, might be communicating something to you. Behavior is also connected. And I love this one. And this is something I need all adults to understand. I will do behavior because it works for me. It is context related. Behavior does not ever occur in a vacuum. Even if it's random and it seems like it just occurs out of the blue, there is a reason for the behavior. There is. It does not just occur in a vacuum by itself. It is influenced by how the consequences and the events that occur before it, how do those interact with my behavior and influence? You do realize adult interaction after a behavior is huge on what happens next. And it's funny because if the behavior gains what I want, I'm more likely to keep doing it. Right or wrong, I will keep doing this behavior if it's getting me what I want. And so behavior is connected that way. Also, my one behavior I may have figured out can serve me a multitude of purposes. And so are we looking at maybe that one behavior, maybe me, when I get physically aggressive, it serves several purposes for me. What purposes does it serve? And then how are you going to teach me better ways to get those responses? And so welcome to the commercial. That's my commercial. 4 basic assumptions about behavior. And so now we'll go back to the regularly scheduled program. So now after we do that, we got environmental strategies. I love this stuff. We're looking at behavior and strategies that we can put in place to help structure, maybe even manipulate my environment to help me be successful. So we've looked at the target behavior, we've looked at the hypothesis. Now we're going to look at, for my BIP, what types of things in my environment can you do or can we do to help me be successful? What conditions in my environment contribute to me not exhibiting the behavior and also exhibiting the behavior? And are there ways to modify those or manipulate those? I will say right now that I am a firm believer in don't just take things away from me because you know I'm going to struggle with them. all the things in life that I struggle with, I still need people to help introduce to me slowly so I can get used to things again. If you keep me away, that's fine. It may not bother me where you can control it in my school age years, but then I become an adult. And if you don't teach me how to do it myself, or you don't teach me the strategies on how to be self-regulatory, keep my self-regulation in check, then I may struggle when I become an adult and I move on with my life. So examine how students should be supported in the school setting, what routines, what transitions, schedules. Please understand, schedules are not just for kids on the spectrum. Schedules are actually for every human being. It is actually research to the teeth that schedules are an automatic anxiety reducer. We all run a schedule. Most of you on this whole webinar thing today, how did you know to log in at the right time? Because you're on a schedule. And so it's interesting that we tend to reserve this scheduling thing for certain disability categories. No, if I need a schedule, help me with it. A lot of our kids who struggle do better when I can see and predict my day and help me through what do we need to put in place for a child on the BIP when you're looking at routine, transition, and schedule. Some big things to be proactive with your BIP. Now my favorite part, and I'm looking at my watch again. I'm still in good time, so hang on. I'm throwing stuff at you guys left and right, so I hope some of this helps, and I hope some of you haven't logged off already thinking, ugh, but here it is. My favorite part of all this is the positive behavior strategies. This to me is probably it's extremely important for us when we're doing a BIP. What strategies do we need to teach the student to help kind of replace the behaviors that they currently have? So if I am doing, when we've kind of hypothesized the function of what my behaviors are doing for me right now, what behaviors do I need to learn that will get me the same thing, but in a better, more appropriate manner? And it's interesting to look at this because this is something that we really need to look at. It isn't just about controlling the behavior we don't like, which I see a lot of, because I'll see a lot of plans, not necessarily BIPs, but I see a lot of plans that will come up, and it's just about token economy, this. All it is stuff that's in place to control the behavior and make compliance a big issue. That, you know what, controlling and complying is one thing, but teaching me the behaviors I currently need in order to offset the behaviors that I'm struggling with are vital for me. And so I tell people there's got to be a mixture of this. And so how do you enhance my competencies and to help me with my social circumstances? That's a big thing right there. So interventions that help me look at what behaviors do I need to have. When I help teachers and I work with teachers in classrooms, I'll always ask, well, what behaviors are bothering you? And they'll tell me the list of behaviors that are bothering them. I said, okay, so instead of this, what would you rather the child do? Oh, I'd rather the child do this. Okay, how are we going to teach this? Notice the word I use is teach. If all you got is a reward system in place and rewards and punishers and consequences, there's got to be the teaching component to this. And how do we teach the kids those skill sets they don't currently have? How do you teach a child to cope with the stressors in their life, to recognize the stressors in their life? Hey, what are their triggers? Are you helping me understand my triggers? And then are you helping me cope with them in a better way? And it's what we all need. It's what even us adults need to work on. And so those are some things that are extremely important when you're looking at a BIP. One of the things you need to look at when you're looking at behavior strategies is also the ability of the student. And so if you look at the first bullet, some of the things that you might want to look at is what are my abilities? Because you can't go beyond my abilities and expect me to get things. You got to look at the abilities of where I'm at right now, and what can you teach me so that I can still get what I need, but in a different behavior, in a new behavior. And then how does the learning environment going to support this? Now I talk to this, and so for all my parents who are on here right now, parents understand I'm talking like this because BIPs are written mostly for the school setting. But as parents, like I said earlier, parents, I want you to understand the BIPs, because you take what's working at the schools and what we're working on in schools, and how do we extend it off to the home? And that's an important thing too for parents out there. I know that we can't hold parents accountable to follow a BIP at home. But parents, if you want your child to be more successful, they're going to need the carryover into the home. And that's where school and parents can work together on, okay, it looks like this here, but what are some ideas a parent can do at the home? And that can be part of a discussion. It doesn't have to be listed on a BIP, but just a discussion to have, because we need that backup. And so if the new alternative behavior requires too much effort or doesn't get me the same thing as my other behavior gets me, I might not really want to change. And I will tell you, I see this a lot. You see, me standing up screaming gets me out of class real quick and gets me what I want really quick. But the behavior you're teaching me and the new alternative behavior, it is like an arduous process, and it is just cumbersome, and it's just not getting that same effect I want. Why would I want to change? I'll just go back to the behavior that works the quickest for me. So when you're looking at alternative behaviors, make sure you look at this and plan alternative behaviors that are going to get some of the desired effects. And it may be a slow process. You might start a BIP with just some secondary behaviors to look at before you get to the ultimate goal of what behaviors you want. What are the stair steps to the behavior? And take it one step at a time. That's why BIPs are fun. They're just, if you write a BIP and it is just, and you're not always looking at revising it or looking at some things different, you might want to reconsider what you wrote, because a lot of BIPs need constant monitoring, constant looking at to see, do we need to readjust certain things? Human behavior is a blast. And it is never textbook, ever. Human behavior doesn't follow a textbook. And so that's why BIPs are sometimes really difficult to get done and to write and to finish, because it's about always having to go back and readjust. And so some strategies that teach the student the new skills. And how is this going to work for me? Who's teaching it? How are you teaching it? What are some ideas? If I'm the classroom teacher, I remember when I was teaching kindergarten and pre-K, and I had some kids with BIPs back then. I look at a BIP and it was like, okay, so you want me to help the child self-regulate, but what does that look like for Johnny versus Sally? What are some specific things that I could probably teach that may help with this specific skill so it gets in place quicker? And so a lot of things we look at too is students with behaviors and that struggle with behaviors need a lot of support in communication, social skills, coping skills, self-regulatory skills. A lot of those skill sets that look like the social emotional side of the world. Have you considered trauma or mental health issues also? Because that might make us readjust different views we're looking at too. But basically what I'm trying to tell people is this. I could go on and on forever on this, but when you look at a BIP, what behaviors are not serving me well and that have to be diminished, but what behaviors are you teaching me instead? And how are you teaching me, and who's teaching me, and what does that look like, so I can get a good handle on these new skills I need to learn? And so those are the things to look at, because as you're teaching, then you help me maintain and generalize to other areas also. And so I always put down here, remember, don't be just locked into one way, one theory, one methodology, one type of way of dealing with behavior. You may have to look at a variety of ways and a variety of methods that can help me get better. And the problem is when you're listing these ways, these methodologies, these supports, all these things that you're listing on the BIP to provide me, don't just check a box. You have to thoroughly explain, how does this look for me? And so I will be quite honest, and it's just who I am. People who know me, I'm just going to be honest with you all. I see some BIPs where it's 1 or 2 pages with just a bunch of boxes checked off. Well, if you got the boxes checked off, for every box you check off, if I'm coming in, what does that mean for that child? If you checked off a box that says use a token economy, well, what kind of token economy for me? Based off the information we have and based off the information on the assessments you've done on me, what type of token economy would work the best? With what? What type of things should we try? Self-regulate. You check off a box that says help students self-regulate. Well, what does that look for me? What does that look like for me versus the next student you deal with for self-regulation? We're all individual, and attacking us all at the same level with the same things isn't going to work. It's don't just check the box. If you're going to check a box, there's got to be an explanation to go with it to help all those involved have a better way of looking at how to do things for this particular child. And that's one of the things that I really need to get across to people. Just checking a box and walking away doesn't help a lot of people. It's the litmus test I give it. If I can pick anybody off the street to look at a child's BIP, you got it laid out well enough that that person just off the street could understand exactly what they're going to need to do for that child. If not, then it's not a good BIP. I need to know, people need to be able to understand what it is we need to do for this child, not just have boxes checked off. Yes, I know I need to self-regulate, because if I could self-regulate, we probably wouldn't be here. But what does that look like for me? And what are the skill sets for self-regulation I need the most help with? So just some things to consider and think about when you're looking for, when you're developing your BIPs. And so once we've gone through the whole positive behavior stuff and we've looked at that step, one of the last things that I will finish with you guys today in regards to a BIP, because I know I'm quickly running out of time, is this. Just because we got a behavior plan in place and it's on paper doesn't mean my other behaviors are just going to disappear. Poof, gone. You do realize I am still going to exhibit some of those behaviors that I had before. I'm not just going to stop yelling and screaming or hitting or be physically aggressive just because you put a plan in place and because everybody agreed on it. And so part of this is understanding that the behavior change takes an extremely long time. Changing a human being's behavior takes a very, very, very long time. So while we're in that process, there's got to be a proactive plan on this BIP that if I'm the classroom teacher, I understand that Sally Sue isn't going to stop hitting overnight. So what's the proactive plan that I need to follow should she start exhibiting those behaviors again? And what plan can I follow so that I don't just get reactive to everything? Because sometimes what happens is those behaviors are still there. Until we start teaching and getting the other behaviors in place, those other behaviors are still there. And so if you don't have something, have a plan for me to follow or something for me to look at to say, okay, it's starting again, try A, try B, try C, and then go to D. What's the process? Have a plan that I can follow so I don't just get reactive to everything still. You see, part of a BIP too is also, I always look at BIPs as we're kind of putting the adults on a BIP too. What are the adults needing to do and change? Because if you don't change the mindset of the adults, your BIP isn't worth the paper it's written on. How do we get adults to start changing also? What are some things that adults can do differently as opposed to what's always been done? And how do they do it differently? And how do I walk through this? So a proactive plan is a great thing to add on to a BIP for adults to use so they can keep their cool and be as calm as they can when some of those difficult behaviors keep coming up. We all know behavior gets worse before it gets better. I always love this one. But when it gets worse, we tend to quit. I always tell people, tried and true in my world, that what we're doing is going to work and it's going to work well as the behavior does get worse. Because any of us out there, any of us, even you, when you are challenged to the core with your behavior always gets worse. You're like, nah, not doing it. No, we always get that way. It's the same for our kiddos. And so until we get that plateau and we start coming back down, it does get worse sometimes. What's in place for me, the teacher or peers or parents even, to deal with that in a better way while we're dealing with this type of human behavior curve that we deal with? So just some things to think about. And like I said, you don't have to, but it's just something that it may help out and help offset. So a few things before I end off that I will just want you to try and remember. I will tell you right now that the implementation of a behavior plan revolves around trust and relationship. Your behavior plan, your behavior intervention plan literally relies on trust and relationships amongst the adults and the student. It will not work if there's no trust or relationship. We all know this. It's one of those things that's always the elephant in the room. But I'm just going to tell you, it is. If you have people around this child where there's no relationship and there's no trust, you can literally have one of the best VIPs on the planet. It's just not going to work. That's why I tell people it is about people. It isn't about programs. Children must be willing to work with the adults that implement the plan. Everybody will work for the people they love, but the people I don't like, good luck to you. And then the big thing at the bottom is remember that you always have to be assessing and monitoring the student's behavior. It is ongoing, nonstop. And BIPs will more than likely require you to modify, revise, update. And hey, let me share this with you guys out there. Sometimes this VIP we create just doesn't work. It happens. Relax. Quit trying to blame everybody. Quit trying to get upset. Just relax. We didn't get it right. Adults, go back to the drawing board and let's see what else we can do. It happens. It's just part of the process. And adults, you got to be okay with that. And it is okay. And so just some things to remember. And so as I end off today, I just hope some of this might have been helpful. I did the best I could in like the 45 minutes I had. I don't think I've ever done anything like this in 45 minutes. And for those of you who know me, this is a stretch for me to do. So just like that iceberg picture I showed you earlier, what I'd like to say is that's kind of where I'm sitting at with the BIP. I've just given you kind of a tip of an iceberg to think about. There's a lot of other things underneath. And so what I tell people is, if you need anything else or if you got other questions, because I know I probably won't have enough time to answer everybody's questions, just email me. And feel free to email, and I'll do my best to get back. But I got one last commercial break for you, and it's brought to you by SpedTex. Just so you all know, SpedTex is a program parents, teachers, anybody can call to get information on special education. It's an information hotline. They are amazing people. And I'm not just saying that because I work with them. They're down the hall. They truly are some of the most amazing people to talk to, and they're very knowledgeable. And so as we end off today, I want to end off with my mantra in life, and there it is. And there's my information should you want to shoot me an email, or if you have any questions that we don't get to, feel free. But I absolutely want to thank everybody out there, because this, like I said, is out of my comfort zone. I like being face-to-face to people. I should have put just a bunch of faces up in my office to make it feel like you all were here. But it has been a pleasure. And thank you all absolutely very much for today. And seriously, feel free to contact me if you got any other questions. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Layne. Great information. I do see that there's quite a few questions in the Q&A box. And I know that I saw some earlier in the chat box. Just a reminder, our chat box is filling up really quickly. If you can make sure you move your questions over to the Q&A box, that will ensure they get answered. So everybody has a few minutes to get that done as well, but we will get started with questions if you're ready.
Oh, I see one real quick. It says, please tell us that parents can contact you. Yes, parents. I get lots of parents who contact me, so feel free, parents. I love working with parents. So anything I can do to help a parent out, I'm good with. So yeah, parents, you're more than welcome to contact me anytime you need to.
Awesome.
I found a Q&A box. So I click on that thing. Whoa. People.
All your questions. I know. There you go. All right.
Wow. Who
Start
knew?
with question number 1, which is, does every autism student need a behavior intervention plan?
You know, there's a lot of people with that out there. I will be honest, you get a BIP if behaviors are truly affecting my academics or my interactions with other people, or if there's some severe behaviors that I need to, there's really those pivotal behaviors that I need help with. I'll see a lot of kiddos on the spectrum that have BIPs. A lot of them are social in nature more than anything else. There's really nothing hard and fast that it says you have to have one, but it's always a good thing if there's some that you struggle with. So I'll be honest with you. Let me just, for Mark, because Mark asked it, let me just be honest. I think all of us could use a BIP. So, I mean, but it's just to see what is it that this child is the struggle with the behavior of such a detriment and interfering with the learning environment that bad. And that's something that's the litmus test for a lot of BIPs. So.
All right. Next question. Can you just give us a little more information about automatic behaviors and where we can learn additional information?
Well, there's two bigger types of behaviors, and please understand this is my background in behavior. I got a degree in human behavior. It wasn't a specific theory type of behavior. So what I learned is when human beings have behavior, there's some of these things called socially mitigated behaviors, which is your environmental ones. Something in my environment or my social world mitigates that behavior. Those usually are behaviors that have patterns to them. Those are usually the behaviors that when we collect data, we see a pattern. We see it's a person, place, thing. It's a certain sensory issue. It's something that we can detect and we can kind of see the pattern that goes with it. Automatic behaviors are those that are random. They just pop up at random. Usually those are more attributed to, those are internal, and usually we don't ever really know the true meaning of them. The only person who does is the person who has that behavior. Those are a little harder to dig into and find out about. There's just a lot of different ways to deal with it depending how the behavior manifests itself. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to email me. I can share some things with you on that one. So I hope it kind of gives you an idea.
Yeah. All right.
Holy man, people, you got a lot on here.
There's a lot coming in.
I like it. I wish I had all day with you guys.
Jay asked, do you have any suggestions for writing a BIP that can easily be adapted for the same behavior without having to return to an IEP meeting to update it?
Sometimes you can. It just depends on the behavior you're dealing with. All I tell people is be careful being program specific on behaviors. Oh, we will do this program or da-da-da-da. Don't get that specific because then you get locked in and you're going to have to go back if the program doesn't work. A lot of it is just looking at the function the behavior serves and just, looking at, like when you talk about coping, help child cope or whatever, just get some, based off of what you understand about the child, what are some basic foundation skills we need to start teaching. And then as you go through, BIPs are difficult in nature. Is a lot of people don't want to have to go back, but sometimes with BIPs, you're going to have to, because that's just the nature of dealing with human behavior. You're not going to get away with just writing one thing and then not having to go back and revise. It's almost impossible. You do write them, and that's part of the ARD committee is writing the BIP so that you have the skill sets that need to be taught. And sometimes those skill sets take a while to teach or to take hold. They're not going to, I always have people, and I tell people this if it may help, I don't know, it might hinder some people are probably freaking out right now, but I come from probably old school behavior where I want data and I want to look at things for 6 weeks minimum to see. Not 3 weeks, not 2 weeks, not within a week. Quite frankly, let me share this with people. I wished I had more time because I'd teach you about the brain and behavior, and I'll give you more insight as to why the whole behind all of this works. But just so you understand, reteaching the human brain a new habit, a new behavior, takes a minimum of about 68 days. It isn't 3 weeks. It isn't the 21 days like people thought. It is literally up to 6 to 8 weeks. But that's with consistency, lots and lots of teaching, lots of opportunity to practice and fail and retry. That's how long it takes. So you're going to want to give yourselves, you think you put a BIP in place, that's going to be, you're going to be collecting a lot of data for a while before you want to decide to change. So just some things to consider.
Okay, next question.
Is there any way I can get a copy of all these questions? So if I can't get to all of them today, I can type into them and tell them?
Yes, Layne, I can definitely send that to you.
Oh, nice. Because I don't want to leave anybody hanging. But I know we're probably going to run out of time in a few minutes. So
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions coming in.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get to a few more. How do you target intense cannot say that word, perseverations when students with autism get stuck in his thoughts? What type of interventions do you recommend?
Well, I'll be honest with you. If you talk about kids on the spectrum, a lot of the brain studies that we've been doing, a lot of things we do in regards to that, understand that actually the perseverations and those thought processes they get stuck in, one of the best ways to get them off of it is to actually dive in there with them. Kids on the spectrum, their brains are not rewarded like ours are by the social world. A lot of us out here in the TV land, in this land, without autism, our brains are automatically rewarded by social interactions and things like that. What we find is those perseveration areas of our kids on the spectrum actually provide them a similar reward to their brain as what social stuff does for us. And so take it, get in there with them, tie it into a bunch of different things, and you'll be surprised at how much you can get through with them. And you can start, when you start going in with their perseveration, I always call people, it's the window in. It's an easy window in for a lot of our kids on the spectrum. When they're perseverating on certain things, that's our cue, jump in on it. They're actually telling us what's actually rewarding their brains at this time. And so if that's rewarding my brain, that technically is my motivator. Technically, you start using that to incorporate other things in my life, odds are I'm going to be more attentive and more responsive to you. So that's just something to consider. Things to think about.
Here is another question.
Not forever. So you poor people out there, you understand it's dangerous asking me questions. So
That's good information. All right, Mary asks, my daughter's teacher told me that my girl talks too much. She also told me that she is smart and all the kids want to be around her. She talks with everyone. She gave her a low conduct grade. I've talked with my daughter, but she told me that she doesn't know why she talks. The teacher calls me every day. Her teacher said that she moves her, but she talks again. What other strategies can they maybe find for that? What do you think about it?
My big thing with things like that, behaviors like that to me are just, she talks a lot. When is she doing all of her talking? Is it during times it's during work time? Is it during when you're supposed to be paying attention in class? There's a lot of things that contributed to it. It's not a bad thing that she talks. She's actually a leader because other kids kind of follow her. I would suggest finding jobs or finding responsibilities in the classroom that can have her utilize that gift, because it might make it easier for the teacher in the classroom too. It isn't, please understand, everybody out there, quit always looking at it has to change the child's behavior. A lot of times we got to change the adult behavior first. Sometimes what the child's behavior isn't that bad. It's just that sometimes we got to get other people to look at things differently. It's actually, if she's smart and she's gifted with gab, there's a lot of things that we could do to turn that into something that she can utilize better in different situations. There's just a lot of things that can be done. If you send me an email, I'll give you some ideas to help out. I could go on forever for stuff like this too.
All right. I'm trying to go through. I know we have some questions that are
There's some big ones on here that I really want to answer, but I think they're more of a private answer for some of our friends out there.
That was what I was wondering, if I can send you some of these.
Yeah.
That are a little more.
There's some that are some big ones that, yeah, there's a lot of things we can take a look at. So
yes. All right. Suggestions when a student doesn't have a good relationship with adults implementing the plan, but there's not much of a choice.
That's adult. That's more of the adult intervention on that point than it is the child. I will be honest with you, and I know this will probably rattle people's cages too. You know that FBA we talk about doing before a BIP, your functional behavior analysis. When I teach about functional behavior analysis, I actually teach people to do an FBA on the adults and the environment first before you ever do an FBA on a child. You need to look at you need to look at an FBA for all the adults and for the environment first so you know how you can change them, and then we start looking at the child. All too often, we're so quick, like I said earlier, to blame the child for their behavior. We need to look at all aspects of it, and we don't ever change behavior if the adults don't change. If we, the adults, keep doing what we're doing, it's ludicrous to think kids are going to change their ways. We adults actually have to change what we do first, and then children will change in behind us. We actually are the exemplars and the role models for behavior change. And so this is all discussions you need to have in a BIP too. How do we look at, that's that environment part I talked about. How do we look at the adults? How do we look at the environment? Because we do have to make changes, and there are things that are going to have to change for us. And so that's important also. And again, I actually do trainings now on adults and their brains, and teach you guys about your adult brain and why you think the way you think and do what you do, and how to readjust your thinking better too. So there's so many avenues off of this that would be a lot of fun to talk about, but we just don't have the time. So
Yeah.
I'm seriously looking at some of these questions. It's like, yeah.
Well, we need to wrap the recording because we're at the hour mark. Is there one more on there you'd like to tackle before we wrap?
I'm looking. I've been scrolling through. It's like I get distracted.
I get that.
Anonymous attendee. There's one on there about how do you help school leaders, principals, assistant principals to understand that the implementation of a BIP is everyone's responsibility. I will say this is a pet peeve of mine, and I'm just going to tell you right now, when that art is held and that discussion is had about a BIP, it needs to be understood that child and that BIP is the responsibility of everybody. We are all in this together. I am done with special ed taking care of this group of kids and gen ed, this group. We are in this together. Everybody who is involved with this child is responsible for helping with the BIP and helping the child learn these new behaviors. It isn't just one group of people responsible over another. Even if I'm a child who's in a self-contained classroom, let's say I'm in a behavior classroom of whatever kind you want to call it. I don't know, there's so many acronyms. How are the gen ed kids getting access to me? How do I get access to my peers? Are the gen ed teachers and all other teachers coming to visit me on a regular basis so I know who they are? These are things that should be part of what we do with our kids, because I can't learn my behaviors in isolation. It's impossible. And so just something to think about.
Very good.
Actually out of time.
So
we are getting to that time, but as mentioned previously, we have all of your questions. We are going to get those over to Layne for him to answer. Some of them were just more detailed than we could cover today, and so Layne's willing to take those questions on, and he's going to go over those through email. So we'll get those over to you, Layne.
That sounds great.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today, and thank you so much, Layne, for some really awesome information. I know
it was a blast, and seriously, everybody out there, thank you for hanging in there with me today. I did the best I could in 45 minutes, so I appreciate you.
All the feedback is really, really good. We're getting.
Oh, look, my phone's ringing now. I hope it's not one of you calling to rebuttal. So
it already is. You're already getting one. All right, guys. I did see a few people in the chat box asking for certificates of attendance. I can get you those. Please send me an email after the fact so that we can get that information over to you as quickly as possible. All right, guys. So we do have some great webinars coming up to follow this one. On October 8th at 12:15, we're going to have Colleen Elby with Disability Rights Texas come, and she's going to talk about bullying involving students with disabilities. So she's going to break down the law and answer some questions on that. And then we're going to follow up on October 15th with Richard Capadagli as he presents on coping strategies when your kids are dealing with bullying. Both of those, again, are on Tuesdays, 12:15 Central Time. We'd love to have you join us. And then the following day, we're going to have Least Restrictive Environment. And that one's going to be by Kia, and she's an LSSP. That is that Wednesday, October 16th at 12:15. And that one again is in collaboration with the ESC Region 10. All right. We also have October 22nd, our Cadre webinar. We're really excited about this one and expect to have great turnout for this. They're going to talk about conflict resolution. And again, this is with Cadre. That's the Center for Appropriate Dispute Resolution in Special Education. And our guest speaker will be Melanie Reese. So join us on October 22nd for that one. We've got a lot coming up in October. All right, then we hit on our November webinars. So go ahead and save the date, November 7th for Texas Legal Framework with Region 18. Transition Services in the IEP coming up on November 12th, and that's with David Beinke with Circle and Associates. And then Wednesday, November 13th, we're going to hit it with Region 18, Child Find. What is it and how does it work?
That's a typo on that one. It's supposed to be Region 10.
Region 10. Sorry about that. Region 10, another collaboration webinar. So, all right, guys, here's our information. Again, if you need those certificates of attendance or you have questions about webinars, ideas you'd like to throw our way, be sure and send those to myself or to Christina. That is our email addresses listed on there. You can also find the recordings for previous webinars as well as a list of our upcoming webinars and registration on our website. That's been shared in the chat box a few times, but it's also up on your screen. And then make plans to join us on Facebook. And we have really great Facebook Live series going on. We do show our statewide webinars. We premiere them the following day, so you can catch those again or share those with anyone you feel like would be a good candidate for our webinars. All right, guys, again, thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you on October 8th. You guys have a great day. Thank you, Layne.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.